They fired me the same morning I packed my husband's urn for Veterans Day. Rain Calder 68 used to teach people how to hit a quarter from 600 yards, now just sips burnt coffee from a chipped thermos by Lane 7. Ever wonder what makes a whole firing range go silent? Tell me what you would have done if you saw that scar. She came early, always alone. Just a quiet woman sitting by the fence with a chipped thermos and an old canvas bag sipping steam into the November wind. The wind had teeth that morning, sharp, mountain-born, the kind that slipped down from Pikes Peak and bit straight through denim and wool. Dust coiled off the gravel paths, lifting into spirals near the benches lined up behind the firing lanes. Veterans Memorial Range was always quiet before 8, just a few regulars wandering through the early chill with stiff knees and slower steps. Rain Calder sat in her usual spot, third bench down closest to Lane 7 under the faded sign that read, "Eye and ear protection required." She didn't carry a weapon. She didn't talk. Some said she didn't blink. "Been coming here every Friday," a voice murmured near the coffee van. "Never fires a round, just watches." No one knew she used to train the kind of shooters who didn't need scopes. The coffee van wheezed steam like an old train engine, filling the lot with the scent of scorched beans and sugar glaze. A line of 3 older men stood hunched over paper cups, one of them carefully peeling the waxed paper off a cinnamon roll. Rain didn't line up. She brought her own, the chipped thermos still radiating warmth after all these years, its lid wrapped in duct tape like a badge of quiet stubbornness. Jesse Whitmore came tumbling up the gravel trail around 8:30, breath-puffing ponytail, bouncing, lugging a bolt-action rifle far too large for her frame. Her grandpa followed behind, one slow shuffle, at a time, his wool hat pulled low, one hand gripping the strap of a folding chair. The girl was eager. The chair was for him, not her. Rain watched. Jesse tried 3 times to brace the rifle against the rest. Each time the recoil surprised her. Not enough to knock her back, but enough to twist her elbow and dull her spirit. Roy Darnell noticed. The young range officer strode over, sunglasses still on despite the muted sun, hands on hips. In that way young men often learn from movies. "Need help, ma'am," he called, not to Jesse, but across to Rain. "We've got reading glasses at the office. Might help with target acquisition." A few snickers. Rain didn't blink. She raised her thermos to her lips. Jesse dropped the rifle again. Rain stood. She didn't speak, just walked over. Her shadow stretched longer than it should have, in the weak light falling across the concrete, as she reached into the canvas bag and pulled out a soft, worn shooting glove. She offered it to the girl, wordless, and gently adjusted her elbow. A quick tap to her shoulder, then a nod. Jesse fired. The shot cracked through the cold air, clean, steady. The paper target 50 yards downrange shuddered. A hole near center mass. Jesse gasped. "Grandpa, I hit it. I actually hit it." The old man nodded once. No smile, but his gaze shifted to Rain. She didn't respond. Just walked back to her bench, sat and resumed sipping from the thermos like it hadn't happened. A breeze lifted the hem of her field jacket, olive green, old issue, the kind with a collar worn smooth by time. Roy adjusted his sunglasses, cleared his throat. "Lucky shot," he muttered. Jesse watched Rain's back with something like wonder. She still wore the glove. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The girl came running. "Ma'am," she called out, hesitating at the edge of the bench. "You dropped this." She held up the glove. Rain looked at it, then at her, then reached out, took it back and tucked it away without a word. Jessie opened her mouth, maybe to say thank you, maybe to ask a question, but Rain was already looking past her, gaze fixed on nothing or everything. The girl hesitated, then smiled anyway, and skipped back toward her grandfather. Mr. Kimball, an old vet on a walker, watched Rain walk away and said quietly, "She walks like she remembers too much." The paper target fluttered in the cold wind, but it wasn't what caught Roy's eye that day. It was the way Rain loaded a mag like she was folding a prayer. Saturday brought more foot traffic. Not crowded, not noisy, just a few more chairs unfolded, more hands wrapped around steaming coffee, and a few newcomers who talked too loudly about how they used to do things back in their day. The bulletin board near the front had sprouted new posters, overnight flyers for the upcoming Veterans Day Memorial, with a faded photo of the local Marine band and red, white, blue borders curling at the corners. Jessie arrived with the same rifle, but this time she wasn't stumbling under its weight. She carried it like she'd been practicing in her sleep. Her grandpa stayed back at the picnic table sipping coffee from a tin cup, the brim of his hat pulled down low. Jessie's eyes darted immediately to Rain's bench. The older woman was already there. Same spot, same thermos. The only new detail was the rifle on her lap, long wooden classic, in a way few modern shooters would recognize. An M1 Garand, older than most of the men on the range that morning. Still just watching, Roy asked, strolling past the lanes with a smirk and a styrofoam cup, "Or you thinking about stepping up?" This time Rain didn't answer. Roy turned to Jessie. "Your coach here doesn't say much, huh? She helped me more than you did," Jessie said, not looking at him. He blinked. "Well, it's a free country." Rain stood. With slow, deliberate movements, she set the Garand on the bench. Her fingers opened the case beside it and retrieved a cloth-wrapped magazine. No flourish, no fanfare, just quiet precision as she slid the rounds in one by one, like someone assembling something sacred. Roy kept watching now, less amused. "She used to be someone important," Jessie whispered to her grandpa. He didn't look up. "If she is, she won't say it." "That's how you know." A voice called out from the far side, an older woman seated in a wheelchair beneath the lean shadow of the awning. Her lap was covered in a wool blanket patterned with stars, her coat draped with an Army Air Corps pin from decades past. She nodded toward Rain. "That's a Garand. You don't see many of those here." Rain glanced over but didn't respond. A younger man, mid-20s, wraparound sunglasses, backwards cap, snorted. "That thing's an antique." Then he paused, because Rain's hands moved like clockwork. No hesitation, no second checks. She slapped the clip into place, and the signature metallic ping echoed as the action closed. She reached into her jacket for earplugs. As her arm lifted, the sleeve of her field coat slipped just enough to reveal a sliver of skin. A tattoo. Stark black, faded at the edges, T-73, reactivated. Below it, a long scar curved along the muscle like a lightning strike. The younger man stopped talking. Jessie saw it too. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. The woman in the wheelchair leaned forward. Her lips parted slightly. She tilted her head like she was trying to hear something far away. Mr. Kimball, leaning on his walker at the edge of the path, shifted his weight so it rose as straight as his back would allow. He raised 2 fingers to his brow in a slow, deliberate salute. Rain didn't see it. Or maybe she did and said nothing anyway. Later, after the brass had been swept and the targets changed out, Roy sat on the hood of his truck, phone in hand. The search bar blinked. He typed it in. ST-73 reactivated. His thumb hovered, then tapped. What came up made him sit forward. "That's not..." He whispered, his voice barely above the wind supposed to exist anymore. One gust of wind was all it took. A scar that had been hidden by time stepped back into the light, and the silence that followed was older than memory. By midday, the crowd had thinned. The Saturday rush was over, leaving behind only the quieter ones, the ones who didn't come to talk. The flags above the booth hung still heavy with the weight of the gray sky. Even the coffee van had closed up early, its awning half-rolled and its generator humming like a tired sigh. Jessie sat cross-legged near Lane 10, scribbling in a small spiral notebook. She'd been drawing, though, not very well, just the outline of a woman in a field jacket and boots standing in front of a target full of holes. Above the figure in block letters she'd written, "The Lady with the Lightning Arm." Rain stood at the far end of the range now, where the fence met the tree line. The wooden bench there was more weathered, the concrete more cracked, as if fewer people had reason to go that far. She cradled a long-range rifle she hadn't brought herself. Mr. Kimball had offered it, saying only, "You might know what to do with this better than I do." She hadn't answered, just nodded once and took it like it had been waiting for her hand all along. Jessie nudged her grandpa. Why'd they stop talking when she bent down? He took a breath before answering. Because sometimes the truth don't speak out loud. It just shows up. Rain didn't ask for a spotter. She didn't ask for silence. But somehow the small group nearby knew to hush. Her first shot rang out clean and sharp. The paper target nearly 100 yards away trembled slightly, then stilled. Second shot, slight wind adjustment, dead center. Third shot, same breath control, same unflinching form. 3 for 3. She waited. No motion in her shoulders, no celebration in her posture. Just the same quiet presence as always. She adjusted her stance for a fourth. That was when it happened. As she leaned forward, her left arm extended slightly past the edge of the stand. The cuff of her jacket caught on the stock and pulled back just enough. The scar was fully visible now, jagged, deliberate, too clean to be random, and too ugly to be an accident. Beneath it, the tattoo marked in blunt military typeface, ST-73, reactivated. The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was reverent. Mr. Kimball, who had sat watching from his walker with narrowed eyes, rose slowly. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He simply lifted his hand to his cap and held it there. One by one, others followed. A man with a limp in lane 4. A woman with a prosthetic glove. An older black Marine who hadn't spoken all morning. No one gave orders. No one asked questions. Roy Darnell, still holding his phone from earlier, lowered it without unlocking the screen. His lips pressed tight. His sunglasses were off. Rain chambered the last round and fired. Another bullseye. Then she stood, checked the chamber, and handed the rifle back to Mr. Kimball without a word. She looked to Jessie, who had stood now clutching her notebook like it might float away if she let go. Rain gave her the smallest nod, tugged her cap down slightly, and walked. Not hurried. Not slow. Just steady. She passed the benches, past the range office, past the flagpole with its unmoving stars and stripes, past them all as they stood silent and still, the gravel crunching faintly beneath her boots. Not a single word was spoken. Jessie stood with the spent casing Rain had left behind. It was warm, almost buzzing in her palm. Later, she took out a Sharpie from her pocket, uncapped it, and scrawled 2 careful words across the brass, "Thank you." Then she tiptoed to Rain's bench and left it there. Jessie told her teacher she didn't talk much. But when she helped me aim, I felt brave. Not loud. Brave. In the Whitmore kitchen, the windows were fogged from the oven's breath. A fresh pumpkin pie sat cooling on the sill beside a lineup of half-painted turkey cutouts. The hum of the fridge competed with the ticking wall clock, and Jessie sat at the table with scissors glue and scraps of gold construction paper. She wasn't making homework. She was making something else a medal. The shape was crooked, the edges frayed, but she'd written in careful block letters, "For bravery without noise." Next to it, a folded card with lined paper torn from her notebook. "You helped without asking, so I say thank you without being told." Her grandpa sat across from her, sifting through a shoebox of old newspaper clippings. The headlines were yellowed and brittle. Fort Blackridge, tragedy, averted civilians, evacuated in secret operation. No official comment from DOD. He pulled one free and set it down gently, its edge brushing Jesse's paper. "Blackridge," he murmured. "Some stories never made the front page." Jesse paused, looking up. Was that where she came from? He didn't answer right away. Just tapped the clipping twice. Some folks got filed away with the paperwork. Doesn't mean they disappeared. Later that night, Rain sat alone in Wheeler's 24-hour diner. The place had seen better decades: linoleum patched with duct tape, jukebox frozen on a Springsteen track, coffee that tasted more like metal than bean. Still, it was warm and it was quiet. Rain took her usual corner booth facing the door. She wore the same jacket, same boots. Her thermos stayed in the truck. Tonight it was the house coffee in a chipped mug and a slice of pecan pie that had more syrup than nut. The waitress shuffled over with a refilled pot and a note in her hand. "Kid left this for you," she said, nodding toward the folded paper. "Said your name's Rain." "Didn't think that was real." Rain nodded once. Took the paper. Didn't open it. The waitress poured. She made a medal, too. "Looks like it's held together with Elmer's and hope." Rain smiled barely. A corner of her lip. Nothing more. Across the room, an older man sat in the shadows. He was hunched, thick glasses magnifying his eyes, a hearing aid blinking red every few seconds. As Rain passed him on the way to the restroom, he straightened a little, looked her way, and softly hummed a cadence from a different century. "Off we go into the wild blue yonder." Rain froze. Just for a second. Not startled, just still. She returned to her booth, unfolded Jesse's note, and read it slowly. Then, with care that echoed something sacred, she reached into her jacket. Inside, behind a sewn-in panel, was a small cloth pouch. From it, she pulled an old field manual, cracked at the spine, its cover worn soft by years of handling. Stamped in faded ink, ST-73, "Do not file." She slid the note inside the front cover, folded the paper metal, and tucked it next to the dog tag, pressed between pages like a flower. The bell above the diner door jingled. 3 men entered. Not loud, not obvious. One had an envelope. The tallest scanned the room with purpose. Rain looked up. Their eyes met. She nodded once. They didn't say her name. Not out of disrespect, but because the name wasn't needed. She was still who she had always been. The back room of Wheeler's diner was quiet except for the soft ticking of a warped wall clock and the occasional groan of the ice machine outside the kitchen door. Light filtered through blinds yellowed by years of smoke and sun slicing the dimness into neat little stripes. A folded flag sat behind glass on a shelf, and a photo above it showed a squad of 12 grinning and squinting in desert wind. The date at the bottom corner read 1982. Rain sat at a small round table, hands loose around a chipped mug. The coffee was black, thick enough to stand a spoon in. No one had touched the sugar. No one had asked. Across from her, 3 men shifted in their seats. Not much had been said yet. The first man, stocky, wide knuckles, the scar of a welding spark down one cheek, opened the talk without preamble. "South Compound, April '89. You stitched me up with duct tape and a bootlace." Rain blinked slowly. "You walked out anyway." He smirked. "Only 'cause you dragged me halfway." The second man leaned forward. Tall, lean, his hands still shook slightly, though from time or memory no one could say. Fourth checkpoint, red crest. You called the bluff. Turned out it wasn't a bluff. Rain sipped the bitter coffee. The third man was the quietest. Eyes pale, nearly translucent, with a gaze that didn't wander. When he finally spoke, it was softer than the others. You shouldn't have had to carry Blackridge. The room stilled. Even the fridge stopped humming for a moment, as if the word itself held weight. Rain didn't reply. She let the quiet settle. The tall one pulled something from his coat. A patch wrapped in wax paper, folded like it had been kept dry through rain mud, maybe worse. He placed it on the table gently, like handing over a medal at a funeral. ST-73. Faded thread, frayed edges, the lightning insignia nearly rubbed clean. They said the op failed, he said. Needed a reason. You didn't die, but they wrote it like you did. The paperwork went through, added the welder. And just like that, ST-73 never happened. Rain stared at the patch, didn't touch it. The quiet man took out a lighter. Not to light, just to turn in his fingers. You were the only one who walked back in. That makes you ours. Still, Rain said nothing. Her eyes stayed on the cloth, but her mind had gone somewhere older, somewhere harder. Finally, she reached forward. Not fast, not slow. She picked up the patch and held it in both hands, thumbs brushing the edge. Her lips moved before her voice came. I kept moving because I thought someone had to. No one interrupted. The welder bowed his head slightly, fingers tapping the edge of the table like a coded beat. The tall one leaned back and exhaled through his nose. The quiet man finally looked up. They're putting your name back in the rolls, he said, quietly, but it'll be there. Rain stood at the gate again, same jacket, same thermos, but this time Roy Darnell stood before she reached him, and saluted first. The frost clung to the benches like a memory not ready to melt. The flag barely stirred in the morning stillness, its cloth a quiet sentinel against the brightening sky. Chairs had been arranged in 3 rows, careful, but uneven, as if placed by hands, trying not to disturb the silence. A folding table stood off to one side, holding a metal tray for spent brass, several unlit white candles, and a stack of small blank tags, each labeled "Unknown but Remembered." Rain walked slowly, boots crunching the brittle edge of grass that lined the gravel path. Her thermos steamed faintly in the cold, the same chipped green as always. She wore the jacket with the elbow patches and the frayed cuffs. It had always fit a little too loose, but never enough to change. Roy stood ahead, both hands at his sides, until she came near. Then he stepped forward, just one pace, and lifted his right hand in a clean salute. No grin, no smugness, just the motion of a man who had finally seen what he needed to see. She nodded once, then walked past him. Jessie waited at the edge of Lane 7, her grandpa seated beside her on a bench, worn smooth by decades of memories. The girl held something wrapped in red string. She offered it up with both hands. I made it, she said softly. It's not real metal, but it's for helping when no one asked you to. Rain accepted it without a word. It was a paper circle folded like an old campaign ribbon drawn over with gold crayon. In the middle, in big rounded letters, it read, "Bravery is quiet sometimes." She tucked it gently into her jacket pocket, then approached the shooting line. She didn't adjust her footing. She didn't stretch. She raised the rifle, with movements practiced over too many years, lined up the shot, and waited just long enough for the wind to pause. The sound of the shot was clean, cutting through the morning like a single violin note in a still cathedral. One shot. She turned, walked to the brass tray, and set the paper medal beside it. Didn't glance back. Chairs creaked as people stood. Some removed their caps. Others just straightened their backs. There was no applause, only the sound of wind rising again, brushing through the flags, whispering against wool coats and denim sleeves. Jessie reached for her grandpa's hand. Mr. Kimball stood still, his walker in front of him, hands gripping it lightly. Rain walked past them all toward the main gate, toward the light that now stretched long and golden across the asphalt. She didn't speak, didn't wave. Her boots tapped out a slow, even rhythm. Sometimes the mission is just to remind people we're still here. She never asked for a nameplate or parade, just stood where the wind met the flag, quiet as ever, yet something in the stillness had changed. Sometimes it's not the noise we make, but the way we show up that tells the truth. Like a porch light left on through the night, a quiet act of kindness can guide more hearts than we know. If this story stirred something in you, maybe pass along that same quiet warmth to someone who's been walking unseen for far too long.